My wife ambushed me with divorce papers at my birthday party in front of her entire family. But little did she know she would regret it. Now, 6 months later, she's sleeping in her car outside my house. So I turned 34 last Saturday. Not exactly a milestone birthday, but Julie, 33F, my wife, well, soon to be ex-wife, told me she was planning something special for the occasion. She'd been weirdly enthusiastic about it the whole week before. Constantly on her phone, smiling to herself, being super secretive. At the time, I thought maybe she was planning some surprise party or something nice after all the crap we'd been going through lately. A bit of background, things between us had been tense. Not screaming match tense, but that cold, quiet tension that honestly feels worse sometimes. The kind where you're both going through the motions but barely making eye contact. Where how was your day becomes a formality rather than actual interest. You know what I'm talking about. We'd been married for 6 years, together for 9. Met in college. She was this gorgeous business major from a rich family with a summer house in the Hamptons and a condo in Aspen, and I was the scholarship kid working 3 jobs to afford ramen and textbooks. Classic opposites attract story, right? I was working at the campus coffee shop where she'd come in every morning for her venti white mocha with an extra shot and almond milk, no foam. I still remember how she'd sit by the window with her MacBook, designer sunglasses perched on her head, looking like she belonged in a coffee shop commercial. I don't know what she saw in me back then. Maybe novelty? The barista with the full ride who was double majoring in business and design? We were both in the same Economics 301 class, and one day she asked me to help her study. One study session turned into dinner, turned into dating, turned into love. Her family never approved of me. Not openly hostile at first, more that subtle, passive-aggressive disapproval that rich people have mastered to an art form. Her dad, Bronson, yes, that's actually his name, like some villain in an 80s movie about ski resorts, would make these little comments about my humble beginnings at every holiday dinner. He'd say things like, "It's so refreshing to see someone who understands the value of hard work," while simultaneously implying I'd never amount to anything significant. Her mom was worse in some ways. She'd ask how that little job of yours is going even after I got promoted to team lead at my marketing firm. I'd talk about landing a major client, and she'd smile tightly and say, "That's nice, dear," before turning to Julie to ask when she was going to apply for that position at her cousin's investment firm. They lived in this massive house in the suburbs, 6 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, a pool that nobody ever used, and one of those fancy kitchens with 2 dishwashers and a wine fridge that costs more than my first car. Seriously, who needs 2 dishwashers? Every time we visited, I felt like I should have worn a name tag that said poor relation. We had a decent apartment in the city. 2-bedroom with exposed brick walls and big windows. Not fancy by her family's standards, but it was the best we could afford while I was putting in overtime to save for a house. I actually loved that place. We'd painted the walls ourselves when we first moved in, spent a whole weekend with paint rollers and takeout, christening each room when we finished it. The kitchen had these quirky yellow cabinets that the landlord let us keep, and we'd found this vintage dining table at a flea market that I'd restored myself. But Julie. She kept posting these Instagram captions about making the best of things or simple living like we were some charity case. Always comparing our life to her cousin Nova, I swear I'm not making these names up, who married some hedge fund guy and lived in a damn mansion with a closet bigger than our living room. We had this thing where I'd cook dinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she'd handle Mondays and Wednesdays. But over the last year, her cooking nights kept getting replaced with work events or drinks with the girls. I'd end up ordering takeout and eating alone in front of the TV, watching whatever show we were supposed to be binging together. The last few months, Julie had been spending more time with her family, coming home late from work events, smelling like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't the Nautica I got on sale at Macy's. She'd get these texts that made her smile in a way she hadn't smiled at me in months. I'm not an idiot. I had suspicions. But I kept thinking if I just worked harder, got that promotion, maybe things would get better. I should mention we had this cat, Jasper, a grumpy orange tabby we'd adopted 3 years ago. Julie had wanted a purebred ragdoll, but we'd gone to the shelter just to look and this one-eyed battle-scarred tomcat had climbed right into my lap and refused to leave. Julie actually fell for him too, and for a while, it felt like we were a little family. But lately, even Jasper had been giving Julie the cold shoulder. Animals know, man. So back to my birthday. I came home from work. Yes, I had to work on my birthday. Welcome to adult life where birthdays are just another day with maybe slightly better lunch, and the apartment was empty. Not even Jasper around to greet me. Julie texted saying to meet her at her parents' place for my surprise. Already weird since her parents' house was the last place I'd want to celebrate anything. But whatever. I figured maybe she was trying to smooth things over with them. I remember stopping to buy some flowers on the way, not for Julie, but for her mom. Always trying to win over the in-laws, like a sucker. I changed into a nicer shirt in the car, dabbed on some cologne, even flossed my teeth. Looking back, it's almost funny how hard I was still trying. I show up at their McMansion in the suburbs, you know the type, with the circular driveway and those pillars that don't actually support anything. Julie meets me at the door with this weird smile that didn't reach her eyes. I should have turned around right then, but I didn't. The living room is full of people. Her parents, her sister Annabelle, the only decent one in the family, couple cousins, some family friends I recognize from past gatherings. They're all holding champagne glasses, and there's this awkward silence when I walk in. Like walking into a room where everyone was just talking about you. Julie says, "Todd, we have something special for your birthday this year." And her dad actually snickers. Not laughs, snickers. Like a cartoon villain. So I'm standing there thinking maybe they got me a car or something. Stupid, I know. When Julie pulls out this manila envelope from behind her back, for a split second I thought maybe it was plane tickets or something. Then she says these exact words, "Surprise. I'm leaving you for someone who isn't a disappointment." The room goes completely silent except for her dad, who starts full on laughing. I'm standing there frozen, still holding the stupid flowers, trying to process what the bleep is happening, when her dad says, "We never thought she'd actually marry someone so beneath her." Thankfully she finally came to her senses. Julie shoves the envelope in my hands. Divorce papers, already filled out, just waiting for my signature. Her mom literally pops a champagne bottle and starts pouring more glasses for everyone. They had planned this whole thing as some kind of sick celebration. I don't know what they expected. Maybe for me to cry? To beg? To make a scene? Instead, something inside me just hardened. Like watching ice form over a lake in winter. I looked at each of their smug faces, at the woman I thought I'd grow old with, and I just felt nothing. Like I was watching this happen to someone else. I asked Julie for a pen. Her smile faltered a bit. Guess that wasn't the reaction she wanted. Her dad handed me his fancy Mont Blanc. He always had to flex with that pen, pulling it out unnecessarily during family dinners to jot down things no one cared about. I went to their pristine white marble countertop, that probably cost more than my college tuition, spread the papers out, and signed every single line without saying a word. No one said anything. The only sound was my pen scratching paper and someone awkwardly clearing their throat. When I finished, I looked directly at Julie and said, "Thanks for the birthday gift. Best one I've ever received." Then I walked out. Didn't slam the door, didn't curse, just left while they stood there in confused silence. Their faces when I didn't break down? Almost worth the whole humiliation. I got in my car and just drove. No destination in mind. Found myself at this crappy dive bar called the Rusty Nail where no one knew me. The kind of place with peanut shells on the floor and a jukebox that hasn't been updated since 1997. Ordered whiskey, then another. Stared at my phone as Julie's texts started coming in. "Why didn't you say anything? Are you seriously not going to fight for us? You're just proving my point by running away." About 3 drinks in, something changed. The numbness wore off, and a cold rage started building. Not the explosive kind that makes you do something stupid. The calculating kind that makes you want to burn someone's world down methodically. See, what Julie and her family didn't know was how much dirt I had. 6 years of marriage to someone from a family that treats household staff like furniture? You hear things. You see things. Their accountant, who drinks too much at Christmas parties and talks about creative bookkeeping. The cousin who's sleeping with her sister's husband, not Nova, the other cousin, Tiffany. The dad's business trips that don't seem to involve much business. So I did 3 things that night. 1. Called my buddy Larry, who happens to be the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. We'd met at a charity golf tournament where I was way out of my league, but Larry took a liking to me because I didn't pretend to know what I was doing. He'd given me his card and said, "If you ever need anything." I'd kept it in my wallet for 4 years, never thinking I'd use it. 2. Started screenshotting every suspicious text Julie had sent or received that I could access on our shared cloud. Pro tip, if you're suspicious of your spouse, check if your iCloud sharing is still turned on. You'd be surprised what syncs automatically. 3. Made a list of every business contact and friend who needed to hear my side of the story before hers. Julie had always been good at spinning narratives. I needed to get ahead of whatever she was going to say. I didn't go home that night, crashed at my friend Mike's place. Mike was a buddy from college who Julie had always looked down on because he worked as a bartender while figuring out what he wanted to do with his life. She'd stopped inviting him over years ago, claiming he was a bad influence because he once brought grocery store wine to dinner instead of something fancy. In reality, he was the only one who'd ever called Julie out on her bullcrap. I woke up on Mike's couch with my phone blown up with more texts from Julie, now sounding more panicked than smug. Apparently, she expected me to come crawling back, begging to work things out. Instead, by noon the next day, Larry had already filed counterpaperwork. I'd withdrawn my half from our joint accounts, left hers untouched, I'm not stupid, and I'd rented a storage unit where I moved all my important stuff while she was having brunch with her family, probably laughing about how devastated I must be. Mike let me stay at his place for the first week. His apartment was small but comfortable, with mismatched furniture and band posters on the wall. No exposed brick or fancy appliances, but it felt more like home than my place had in months. We stayed up late playing video games like we used to in college, ordered way too much pizza, and for the first time in years, I felt like myself again. It's been a week now. I'm staying at an Airbnb while I figure out my next move. It's this little studio with a kitchenette and a balcony overlooking a busy street. Not much, but there's something freeing about being in a space that has no memories attached to it. Julie's gone from smug to confused to angry to frantically calling me every hour. Her last text said, "This isn't how this was supposed to go." No crap, Julie, this isn't how any of it was supposed to go. Larry says I'm in a stronger position than she expected. No kids, thankfully. My name on most of our major assets. And enough evidence of her affair. Oh yeah, did I mention she's been sleeping with her coworker Ronan for months? To make her disappointment claims look pretty ironic. So that's where I am now, planning my next steps carefully. The rage hasn't subsided, but it's focused now. Her family thought I was nothing, treated me like dirt for years, celebrated the end of my marriage like it was a graduation party. They have no idea what's coming. Anyone else ever deal with such a public humiliation from a spouse? How did you handle it? Because right now, I'm walking the line between taking the high road and scorched earth. And I'll be honest, scorched earth is looking pretty tempting. Update, 3 months later. First of all, I was not expecting my original post to blow up like that. RIP my inbox. Thanks for all the awards and support. And to the 3 people who DM'd me their divorce attorney recommendations, respect. So it's been 3 months since the birthday party from hell. And some of you have been asking for an update. Buckle up, because there have been developments. Where to start? I guess with the bombshell I discovered 2 days after my last post. So I'm going through our shared cloud storage to download photos I wanted to keep before Julie could delete them, mostly pics of Jasper, who I'm happy to report is now living with me full time after Julie said keeping him wasn't practical anymore. And I stumble across a folder called Work Presentation. Weird thing is, it was created around the time Julie started acting sketchy. Being the suspicious bastard I now am, I clicked on it. It wasn't work presentations. It was hundreds of screenshots of texts between Julie and her coworker, Ronan, going back 8 months, complete with cute pet names, hotel meeting plans, and enough emojis to stock a digital grocery. Pro tip, if you're cheating, maybe don't save the evidence to a shared cloud account. Just saying. There were selfies of them together at places Julie told me she was working late at. Turns out she wasn't analyzing quarterly reports at 10 p.m. on a Thursday, unless Ronan's abs were somehow involved in the financial analysis. I forwarded everything to Larry, divorce attorney extraordinaire, who literally just texted back, "Christmas came early this year." The guy's a savage and I'm here for it. So that's discovery number 1. But here's where things get interesting. After the initial shock wore off, I made 3 decisions. 1, I was going to focus on getting my crap together instead of just revenge. Don't get me wrong, revenge is still on the menu, but it's a side dish, not the main course. 2, I was going to let the divorce process play out through Larry without engaging with Julie directly. Every time she tried to talk to me about working things out, I'd just respond with, "Please direct all communication through my attorney." Drove her crazy. 3, I was going to start subtly building a new life that would eventually make her regret everything. Not for her to see, but for me. Because the best revenge isn't just living well, it's becoming someone they never thought you could be. The apartment we shared had too many memories, so I found a month-to-month rental in a neighborhood I'd always liked but Julie thought was too artsy. Nothing fancy, but it has this small balcony where I can actually see the stars at night. First night there, I sat outside with a beer, looked up at the sky, and realized I hadn't felt peace like that in years. I brought my workbench from the storage unit and set it up in the spare bedroom. Julie had always hated when I worked on my little projects, complained about the sawdust and the smell of wood stain. Now I can work on furniture restoration whenever I want. The landlord actually loves it. I fixed his antique coffee table and now he's telling all his friends about my skills. Started hitting the gym regularly. Not because I'm trying to get a revenge body, though, NGL, that was part of the motivation. But because I needed somewhere to put all this anger. First week, I could barely lift anything without my noodle arms shaking. Now I'm actually starting to see definition. Who knew emotions could be channeled into biceps? The divorce proceedings have been interesting. Julie apparently expected to get half of everything plus alimony because, in her words, she sacrificed career opportunities for our marriage. Larry actually laughed when he heard this. Turns out those sacrificed opportunities are hard to prove when you've been spending your work hours sending dirty texts to your coworker instead of, working. The affair evidence was our ace card. Julie's family had always positioned themselves as these perfect, upstanding community pillars. Her dad Bronson is always posting on LinkedIn about family values and integrity in business. The threat of their precious daughter's affair becoming public knowledge during divorce proceedings made them suddenly very agreeable to Larry's terms. One weird moment came when I was clearing out the last of my stuff from our apartment. Julie showed up unexpectedly. First time I'd seen her since the birthday ambush. She looked different. Hair all messy, wearing sweatpants, which she never did before. She always used to say sweatpants were giving up on life, guess life gave up on her first. She started with this whole speech about how she made a mistake, how Ronan wasn't who she thought he was, how maybe we could talk about reconciliation. I just walked past her with my box of stuff and said I'd have my attorney contact her as if she had anything to discuss. The look on her face, like she genuinely couldn't comprehend that I wasn't falling to my knees with gratitude for this second chance, was honestly priceless. So here's where things stand now. The divorce is almost finalized. No alimony, thanks to the affair evidence. We're selling the apartment and splitting proceeds, though I let her keep most of the furniture since I'm starting fresh. I kept the record player we bought on our 3rd anniversary and the vintage dining table I restored. Those were non-negotiable. I've reconnected with old friends Julie always hated. Remember my buddy Mike, who she said was a bad influence because he once brought grocery store wine to dinner instead of something fancy. Turns out he's still the same solid dude he always was, and now we hang out weekly for game nights. He's dating this awesome chef now who makes the most amazing empanadas I've ever tasted. I started that side business idea Julie always laughed at. Nothing huge, just customizing vintage furniture. Something I always liked doing but Julie thought was tacky. Made my first sale on Etsy last week. The profit was like $27 after expenses, but damn it felt good. The customer left a 5-star review and commissioned another piece. Here's where it gets juicy. Julie's family business, high-end real estate development, has hit some snags lately. Apparently, they had this big commercial project that lost its main investor. This happened right after I had lunch with my old college roommate who, plot twist, now works for that investor's company. Did I mention anything specific about Julie's family during lunch? Nope. Did I accept his LinkedIn connection request afterward? Absolutely. Julie's sister Annabelle reached out to me last week. She was always the only decent one in that family. Said Julie has been a complete wreck, and Ronan dumped her after her dad tried to get him a better position at their company. Apparently, Ronan was only interested in Julie for her family connections. Shocked Pikachu face. Julie's Instagram has gone from daily posts about her #blessed life to complete radio silence. Meanwhile, I've been posting occasional updates, hiking trips, furniture projects, nights out with friends. Nothing flashy, just me living a normal, happy life. Her best friend accidentally liked one of my photos at 2 a.m., then quickly unliked it, so I know they're watching. Last night was what would have been our anniversary. I was sitting on my balcony scrolling through Twitter, feeling pretty okay actually, when my phone lit up with a text from Julie. I know you probably hate me, but I can't stop thinking about where we would be if I hadn't ruined everything. I miss your terrible jokes and the way you always made coffee for both of us, even when we were fighting. The apartment feels so empty now. Ronan was a mistake. My family was wrong. I was wrong. Please, can we just talk? I'm not above begging at this point. I stared at that text for a full hour, typed and deleted about 15 different responses. In the end, I just put my phone down and went to bed without replying. The thing is, 3 months ago, I would have given anything to get a text like that from her. Now, I'm not even sure what I want anymore. The anger is still there, but it's different now, less consuming. This morning, I woke up to find she'd sent 5 more messages overnight, each more desperate than the last. The final one just said, "I'm parked outside your building. Please come down." I looked out my window, and sure enough, there was her white Audi in the visitor parking. She was just sitting there, looking up at the building. I closed the blinds and made coffee. What would you do? Part of me wants to hear what she has to say. Another part thinks opening that door, even a crack, would undo all the progress I've made. And a small, petty part that I'm not proud of wants her to feel exactly what I felt that day at her parents' house. Life is weird, man. 3 months ago, I thought my world was ending. Now I'm actually starting to think whatever comes next might be better than what I had before. Final update, 6 months later. I never expected to be writing a third update to this saga, but life keeps throwing curveballs. For those just tuning in, check my post history for the full backstory. Basically, my ex-wife Julie ambushed me with divorce papers at my birthday party in front of her entire family, who literally popped champagne to celebrate getting rid of me. Classy stuff. So it's been exactly 6 months since that lovely birthday surprise. A lot has changed. I moved out of that month-to-month rental into an actual house. Nothing fancy, just a small 3-bedroom in a decent neighborhood with a yard where I can finally get a dog, more on that later. It's got these creaky hardwood floors and a kitchen that desperately needs updating, but the mortgage is actually less than what I was paying in rent for our apartment. Turns out when you're not trying to live in the right neighborhood to impress people who don't matter, housing gets a lot more affordable. The divorce was finalized 2 months ago, with surprisingly little drama in the end. Julie's family lawyer folded like a cheap lawn chair once Larry showed the receipts of the affair. Larry actually high-fived me when we got the final papers, not very professional, but satisfying as hell. My furniture side hustle has been doing okay. Not quitting my day job okay, but enough to fund my coffee addiction and pay for streaming services. I've got regular customers now who specifically request my style. Still weird to think people actually like the stuff Julie used to call tacky garage sale rejects. I even got featured in a local magazine's Artisans to Watch section. Printed that page and framed it, not gonna lie. My day job has been going well too. Got that promotion Julie always said would never happen without her family's connections. Turns out hard work and not having someone constantly undermining your confidence can do wonders for your career. My new boss actually appreciates that I can think outside the box, something Julie's family always saw as a liability rather than an asset. I've been seeing a therapist too. Not something I ever thought I'd do, but Mike's girlfriend recommended hers, and it's been helpful. Unpacking 6 years of subtle put-downs and gaslighting takes time. Sometimes I still catch myself thinking Julie wouldn't like this before remembering that doesn't matter anymore. Anyway, I was having a pretty normal Thursday night. Ordered pizza, the kind with pineapple that Julie always said was disgusting, fight me, binging that new series everyone's talking about on Netflix. Honestly, it's mid, but I'm too invested to stop now. Jasper was curled up next to me, purring like a motor. He's happier these days too, gets the run of the house instead of being banished from rooms with the good furniture. When my Ring doorbell notification goes off at like 11:30, I check it, thinking it's probably some drunk neighbor who got the wrong house again. Instead, I see Julie's car parked across the street. Just sitting there, lights off. At first, I thought maybe she'd drop someone off, but the car didn't move for over an hour. So I did what any normal person would do, ignored it and went to bed. But I couldn't sleep knowing she was just waiting out there. Around 1 in the morning, I checked the camera again, and her car was still there. That's when my phone started blowing up with texts. Todd, please, I know you're home. I just need 5 minutes. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Please answer. I've made a horrible mistake. And the kicker that actually made me get out of bed, I've been sleeping in my car for 2 days. I have nowhere else to go. I went to the window, and sure enough, I could see her reclined in the driver's seat of her Audi. The same car her daddy bought her for her 25th birthday that she once told me was entry-level, even though it cost more than I made in 6 months. I debated what to do. Part of me, the petty part, wanted to just close the blinds and let her enjoy her car camping experience. But I'm not actually a monster, so I threw on sweats and a hoodie and went outside. The look on her face when I tapped on her window was rough. Her makeup was smeared, hair unwashed, wearing what looked like the same clothes from her last Instagram post 3 days ago. She scrambled to unlock the door, almost falling out in her rush to talk to me. First thing I noticed was the smell, not like BO smell, but that stale fast food and desperation smell you get from living in your car. Second thing I noticed was she'd lost weight, like a lot. Julie was always thin, but now she looked almost gaunt. She started rambling immediately, half crying, half talking. It took a minute to make sense of what she was saying. Apparently, Ronan, a fair guy, wasn't just sleeping with her, he was also funneling information about her family's business to competitors. Once Julie's dad found out, he fired Ronan, who promptly dumped Julie and disappeared with a bunch of confidential info. But it gets better. Julie, in her infinite wisdom, had been covering for Ronan at work, changing reports to make his numbers look better because she was in love. When everything came to light, Daddy Dearest finally had enough and cut her off completely. No more job at the family business, no more allowance, no more paid apartment. She'd been couch surfing with friends for weeks but had burned through everyone's goodwill. Her last roommate kicked her out for not paying rent, which is how she ended up sleeping in her car outside my house as a last resort. I couldn't help but ask why she didn't go to her parents' McMansion. That's when she dropped the bomb that her dad Bronson's business was under investigation for some shady financial stuff that Ronan had exposed. Turns out Mr. High and Mighty had been cutting corners and cooking books for years. Their assets were temporarily frozen, and they'd had to downsize dramatically while the investigation continued. The karmic justice was almost too perfect. I couldn't have orchestrated a better downfall if I'd tried. And I didn't have to do anything, they imploded all on their own. I invited her inside, not because I was considering taking her back, but because it was cold, and I didn't need a hypothermic X on my conscience. Plus, I'm not gonna lie, part of me wanted her to see how well I was doing without her. She walked in and immediately started crying again, this time about how nice my place looked. It's literally just normal furniture with actual plants I've managed to keep alive. But compared to her living in a car, I guess it was the Ritz. We sat at my kitchen table, and I made coffee while she talked. The whole story came pouring out. How her parents had pressured her into the divorce after finding out about Ronan, convincing her she could trade up while taking half my assets. How they'd planned the whole birthday ambush as a way to humiliate me so I'd sign quickly without fighting. How she'd realized within weeks that she'd made a terrible mistake, but her pride kept her from admitting it. She actually said, and I quote, "I thought you'd fight for me." That's when I laughed. Not meanly, just the absurdity of it all. She orchestrates this public humiliation, tells me I'm a disappointment, serves me divorce papers on my birthday, and expected me to what? Beg her to reconsider? Write a heartfelt letter about how I couldn't live without her? I asked her what she wanted from me now. More tears, then she laid it out. She wanted to try again. She'd learned her lesson and grown as a person. In 6 months, apparently. She had nowhere to go, no money, no job prospects. Her expensive degree was useless without Daddy's connections. She thought maybe she could move in with me while we figured things out. I let her finish. Then I did something that surprised even me. I thanked her. I thanked her for the divorce. For showing me exactly who she and her family were. For forcing me to rebuild my life on my own terms. The past 6 months had been hard but also weirdly liberating. For the first time since college, I was making choices based on what I wanted. Not what would please her or impress her family. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Then came more tears and bargaining. She'd do anything to fix things. She'd change. She'd never appreciated what she had. I told her she could crash on my couch for one night because it was late, and I wasn't sending anyone out to sleep in their car. But in the morning, she needed to figure out her next steps. Steps that didn't involve me. The look of shock on her face was almost comical. I don't think Julie had ever been told no in her entire life. Morning came, and I made breakfast because that's just what decent humans do. While we were eating, her phone rang. It was her dad. She put it on speaker, habit I guess, and I heard Bronson's voice for the first time since the birthday party. Gone was the smug condescension, replaced by something I'd never heard from him before, desperation. Their business was barely hanging on. Investors were pulling out left and right. They needed help from someone with connections in the industry, and Julie had mentioned I'd been doing well. He actually asked if I would consider meeting with him to discuss potential opportunities for mutual benefit. I almost choked on my coffee. The same man who laughed at me for being beneath his daughter was now practically begging for my help. Julie looked at me with this weird mix of hope and embarrassment. I told Bronson I wasn't interested in any business arrangements with him, but I knew someone who might be able to help, Mia, the woman I'd been seeing for the past month. She's actually brilliant at helping struggling businesses rebuild their reputation. Just friends so far, but honestly, the healthiest relationship I've had in years. We met at a furniture show where I was exhibiting some pieces. She came by my booth 3 times before working up the courage to ask me out for coffee. It was adorably awkward and refreshingly genuine. There was a long silence on the phone, then Bronson asked for her contact information. I gave it to him, ended the call, and looked at Julie. The realization was dawning on her face that not only was I not taking her back, but I'd moved on. She left an hour later with a backpack of essentials and an Uber to her sister Annabelle's place, who'd agreed to let her stay temporarily. As she was leaving, she asked if I would ever forgive her. I told her I already had, not for her sake, but for mine. Holding on to anger was exhausting, and I had furniture to refinish and a dog to adopt.